Welcome back to our Principles of Microeconomics video series. In our last video, we introduced the idea of monopoly, and in this video, we're going to examine the effect of monopoly on consumer and producer surplus, and then consider some potential solutions. Let's get to it. In the monopoly problem, there's just one seller, and there are barriers to entry. The seller can then act as a price maker, just meaning that a monopoly producer is going to produce the quantity such that marginal cost equals marginal revenue, and then the demand curve is going to determine the price that consumers actually pay, as in the example you see now on screen. Notice here that the price the monopoly producer charges exceeds average total cost, leading to long-run profits, rather than competition bringing prices down to average total cost. What matters to us is that because the price exceeds average total cost, the monopoly producer's behavior is going to lead to welfare losses. Take the market for the allergy medicine Claritin, just as an example. To maximize welfare, a competitive market would set the price of the good equal to the $1 marginal cost, leading to a large triangle of consumer surplus. At a price of $1, the quantity demanded would be 1,000, and every unit sold at $1 would create benefits to society because somebody values it more than the $1 marginal cost of production. In contrast, because Claritin is a patented drug, the company who makes Claritin can generally act like a monopoly producer. So instead of producing 1,000 units, they produce only 500 units, because that's the quantity where their marginal cost is equal to the marginal revenue. That just means that producing any more units of the good would mean marginal cost is greater than marginal revenue, and the company would make lower profits if it was to produce more than 500 units. In turn, at a quantity supplied of 500, the demand curve will tell us that the firm will be able to sell all 500 units of the good at a price of $3.50. The consumer surplus is therefore the blue triangle above the price and below the demand curve. The pink rectangle is producer surplus. It is the area below the price and above marginal cost for the units that are produced. The yellow triangle is an area of deadweight loss. Producing these units would create benefits to society because people would be willing to pay for them. But because the monopoly producer is a single price monopolist, they can't produce those units and still make more profit, because they would have to charge less for the 500 units that they already sell. That's just what it means to be a single price monopolist. You have to charge everybody the same price. So instead, the monopoly producer will maximize their profit by producing less and charging a higher price compared to the socially optimal equilibrium price and quantity. You're probably not going to like this, but the solution to the monopoly problem is to charge different customers different prices. This practice is known as price discrimination, and there are three types. First degree price discrimination involves charging all customers their exact willingness and ability to pay. If the monopoly producer doesn't have to lower the price that they charge everybody else, then they can produce all of the units for which someone will pay at least the marginal cost or more. Note that first degree price discrimination is going to be the only solution that completely restores economic efficiency, even if that means that all social surplus is producer surplus. And you can see that consumers get no consumer surplus here because they all pay a price equal to their willingness to pay. Second degree price discrimination involves charging customers different prices based on some characteristic of the purchase, like an early bird special, or buying in bulk, or matinee shows, or cheapy Tuesdays at the movie theater. This really helps to get some of those consumers who have that lower willingness to pay to then buy the good or buy more of the good. In the example on screen, the monopoly producer is able to target those who have a willingness to pay lower than the monopoly price. We say they can successfully segment the market. By doing so, they create a new marginal revenue curve that applies only to the consumers with that lower willingness to pay. And then the monopoly problem essentially just repeats itself for just those few consumers. For that reason, the monopoly producer can now produce more of the good, and they'll produce at a point where MC equals MR2, and then charge those particular consumers the discriminatory price. However, while second degree price discrimination leads to greater consumer and producer surplus, there is still going to be some deadweight loss. Third-degree price discrimination involves charging customers based on demographic characteristics, such as senior discounts, student discounts, ladies' night. Again, with this solution, there will still be some deadweight loss. Often, it may not be possible to effectively price discriminate. It also may not be desirable if we're concerned about equity. To try to restore efficiency and to reduce deadweight loss, the United States has several federal agencies who try to avoid, and if unavoidable, fix the kinds of market failures that are associated with monopoly. Examples include like the Food and Drug Administration, the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Federal Aviation Authority. Other countries have similar agencies to do a similar job. In the United States, these agencies exist because of the Sherman Act of 1890 and the Clayton Act of 1914. These acts gave the US government the ability to sort of intervene in markets where consumers are being harmed by the behavior of producers, including when there's issues of collusion and illegal cartels. In addition, in situations of monopoly, such as local utilities, local governments can attempt to rectify the problems by setting prices equal to average total cost and then requiring the monopoly producer of gas, electric, water, and so on to sell to all of the customers in the area. These approaches can all help to solve the inefficiencies created by monopoly. At the same time, these powers create incentives for firms to lobby for special treatment. It's often just not easy to ensure that some policy that they create will truly leave consumers better off. Remember how difficult it was to make the world a better place by banning water bottles at the University of Vermont, or by voting on public good provision in the case of the playgrounds? Note that both perfect competition and monopoly are unrealistic extremes. Microsoft is not a monopolist, and Farmer Joe doesn't sell eggs in a perfectly competitive market. We study these extreme examples only to highlight when markets can deliver the best outcome for society, and simultaneously to highlight when it's the opposite, and in some ways the worst case scenario, perfect competition and monopoly. Instead of these extremes, most markets are either oligopolistic, where there's a small number of sellers who interact strategically, or they're imperfectly competitive, where there are lots of sellers, each with a little bit of market power, like a monopoly producer. Those market structures will be our next topics of study, and I'll see you in the next one.